this long. There was no way we could possibly have reshot that either and made our schedule. And that's critical because every extra day just means feeding people, and that's how tight our budget was. So the scene was working because Debbie was so damn creepy in it. But it wasn't the scene that I envisioned in the script, and the guys were able to digitally fix a lot of the mistakes there, and I think it's probably the coolest effect in the film. So I think that combining practical effects and CGI is really a good way to go. But the intention was to go practical as much as possible.
Okay, so you think it's maybe a good idea to, it's perfectly fine to use it as a tool, but just don't let it be incredibly overbearing and let your project become something completely different because of it?
I'm a guy who hates CGI, but I would never tell a filmmaker, don't use CGI. It's every artist's decision what tools to use. It's just not the style I care for.
Fair enough. And a question to you, a lot of times working on independent films, and especially this one, you're probably the most learned actor out of anybody. What's that like to go on a set and maybe, depending on each person, I'm not speaking for Greg, but they expect you to play acting coach. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, no, that happens a lot, but I have to say, like, being a fan of Greg for so long, and, you know, like I was telling him earlier today, I just rewatched Brain Damage, and, you know, he worked on that, he worked with Henenlotter in the 80s, so, you know, he underplays his knowledge of film and how much he's contributed to the whole 80s New York City underground genre. So he is a dream to work with. He totally gets it. My partner for most scenes was Lee, which played my boyfriend, squatter boyfriend in the movie, and he was fantastic because he knew that the more time we took creating a relationship, the more levels we could find in scenes that could have been played surfacely. Not that they were written that way necessarily, but a lot of actors would have played it a lot more surface, and whether it comes through or not is another story. But we spent days and days and days talking over our, you know, subtleties and how we can, like, F with the minds of these other two innocents. And, you know, we even shot scenes that they didn't know about, that they didn't see until the film was done, how we were, like, undermining them when we were doing our scenes and they were off that day. And we just had a lot of fun with it. Normally speaking, it's tough working with actors who are new. I enjoy it, but it's difficult because then it's harder for me to fly. It's harder for me to, like, really, like, go and fly. And I love doing it. I just love. Then it becomes, you know, I enjoy movies where I have these weird, bizarre, long scenes that have no dialogue and I'm just improvising emotions. I've sort of come to that strange point where I love doing that. And maybe that's why. But you know, I learn from everybody, even new actors. You know, I can learn from everybody, but I certainly like to learn, period. So it's more enjoyable when the director and when the actors bring something to me that I can rip off of, like a jazz musician. It's just so much more fun, you know. And I think you can see the more fun you have in a work fun type of way, the more it translates to the film stock, the video stock, I think.
And let me throw this is kind of like to both of you guys. First, like, how did you approach the role of April, and was she, like you said, you wrote the role for her. Did she do it the way that you intended it to be, or was there a lot of her in the role?
Alice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That was my notes' fault. I'll blame it on my notes.
I should say that all of the actors breathed certain things into the script that wasn't there. And I think one of Debbie's best scenes is the slow deli in on her monologue, and she tweaked all that dialogue and actually made it much better. Very happy that my name is going to get attributed to that speech because it's not all mine. We learned very early on when we put the four of them together, and Lee is quite experienced too. Keelan, who played the lead, he has like a background in college Shakespeare maybe, but he's an author and he does reading and he understands character. And Jen has only worked in local shorts in Buffalo. And I have to say the four of them, they both pulled together as an incredible unit, but we're also constantly messing around with each other and as Debbie said, trying to undermine each other. And I remember one day Lee came to me and he said, "Damn it, Debbie and I had this planned and we were going to do it and Keelan figured out and they won that one."
Yes, they won that
one. It was very cool to see what was going on. And
that's right.
You know, there's a saying that 90% of directing is casting, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. And for me, it was just exciting to see what was going on and to try and encourage that to go on. But really, they deserve all the credit for the character stuff that was not on the page.
I just want to add, I'm so sorry, Greg, but I just want to add how much fun that was, because you had four people that lived, breathed, and everything their role. And it really was about, you know, doing things where, you know, if we were eating, it's not like we were being mean to each other and undermining each other. However, it was about making these big, like, fancy plans in every scene. But they caught on very quickly, didn't they?
Yes.
They caught on too quickly for our liking. But we had a great time. But when we were having sex and they were having sex and we were making fun of them, they weren't there that day. And when we just said things that you didn't even use in the final cut, that were just not disparaging, but they were fun. And I was like, oh my God, they're gonna hate us, because none of that was in the script. And it was, I just have to agree with you, it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and that's why we all went and got Slime City Massacre tattoos.
That's right. Mine is on the back of my calf.
Mine's on my neck. Keelan is on his
and you can see it in the film. He sits up behind Jennifer. And what does SCM mean? Welcome to Slime City Massacre. And after we got the tattoos, Debbie said, you just have to promise that when you get distribution, promise that they can't change the title.
Yeah. Oh no, please God. I said, please, no, now that we have the tattoos, you have to stick.
Unless it's Slime City Mafia, Slime City Musical.
It's got to be SCM because of the tattoos.
About 10 of us have the tattoo now.
Yeah. And that's how special the experience was. And I really mean it after 150 movies. It was just a time of a lifetime for me. Because, yeah, I'm working with, you know, Greg, one of my idols, and he's in the same age group as me, but I'm just saying, like, where he's coming from and what he's done is just like the stuff that I always wanted to do. So I just feel very honored to be involved with the movie.
I don't even remember what the character of Alice was like in the script, but I doubt very much that any role that Debbie does is the same as it is on the page. I'm sure it's greatly expanded and has a lot of depth. And I watched her working with the other actors, and I don't know that they were looking for coaching, but I know that she was always helpful without stepping on anyone's toes, without telling people how they should. But like in the scene where she brings Jennifer out, Jennifer injured her hand on day 5, which is why she has those bandages on. That's why in some scenes she doesn't have anything on, and some she has a Band-Aid on two fingers, and some she's got this giant lobster claw. And her first day back after having that accident, she almost lost her fingers. What happened was we didn't have electricity in those buildings, and in the scene where the two, Jennifer and Keelan, beat the 2 frat boys to death, she wandered off to go to the bathroom, and she was wearing the bandages and everything. And I heard a crash and ran, and there were these, they're not holes in the floor, but they were like access compartments where the metal lids had been removed, and she had fallen down one, and had apparently reached out for a rusty piece of metal on her way down, and it almost took her finger off. So I looked down the hole, and she was clinging to the side like Spider-Man, and I jumped down and brought her up, and blood was just pouring out. She's going, I don't need to go to the hospital, and it's just literally spattering on the floor. Her fiance saw the wound in the hospital and passed out. She showed up for filming the next day.
Yes, I cannot believe what a trooper she was. I watched those scenes where she's beating up the mercenary with that hand. I'm like, I had the same thing happen to Four Fingers. I was like, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know. I think she was a trooper.
She was so committed to the project and loved working with Debbie and was having the time of her life and just gave birth, so I'm glad she had that experience of working on the film, because who knows when she'll be free to do it again, and just didn't want to let anyone down. So I mean, that was terrific. And then when she went to the hospital, of course, she's got bandages on already, she's got pink slime on her, she's got blood all over her. They were like,
"You're worried about your fingers, lady?"
What do we do?
Anybody have any questions? And come on, guys, somebody. Has anybody watched Slime City Massacre?
Yeah, so we were
I
just.
say that, I was about to question.
Yay!
Okay.
Okay, so when you write a character or script, do you have a preconceived notion of what you want to see? And if, like, your viewing audience sees it different, does that bother you?
Generally, when I do a story, I start with the characters. That's really what matters to me, especially in the novel. I have a few key scenes in mind. I don't remember when the whole bathtub thing came to me, but before I started writing it, I did know the bathtub was going to happen. I didn't know how the ending was going to play out. In fact, if I remember correctly, I got about 75 pages in, maybe 80 pages, and I was like, oh, I got to tie this up. So instead of trying to compete with the first Slime City, which has really survived this long because it's a big gross out finale where one nasty thing happens to another and you can't believe how far it goes, rather than try and compete with that, I decided I've got these 4 characters. It's more interesting if there's character stuff going on in this climax, and I won't even worry about it being as disgusting. That's why the brains are intentionally cute. You know, you kind of want to pick one of those things up until you see the teeth. But in general, I'm not bothered by audiences seeing things differently, as long as when they're discussing it with me, I understand where they're coming from. I do have a friend who, everything, I see red and he sees blue, and I look at him and I'm like, how can you possibly think that's blue? It's clearly red. So if I understand what they're saying, yeah, that's fine. You know, that's what subtext is all about, is for people to interpret.
What was fascinating for me is seeing the group of people tonight watching the movie. The screening I was in New York was all people who knew Slime City.
Right.
And it was fascinating to me what people would think of so many, and they're not in jokes like you're missing out on anything per se, but if you saw the first one, you would just see more tie-ins. And it was crossing my mind when we were watching, gee, I wonder how many of these things.
Yeah. And also,
And that's, I guess, for only them to answer, really, not us.
in the first film, it's very clear that the guy, when he's possessed, has to kill people to turn back human. And I think you get that point in this, but if you haven't seen the first film, you may not realize that the whole reason that Debbie's character has melted into this thing of bathtub is because she was a former junkie and she started drinking the elixir. She was more concerned with getting high than anything else, and she didn't kill anybody. So that's why she melts out like that. Somebody who saw the first film said he didn't understand that, and that kind of alarmed me. But
Well, I say the film definitely explained that. I think there's some people who may just not have caught on, but it was definitely explained toward the end that that's what had happened.
yeah, I also think that those scenes are so outrageous that I don't think people are even wondering.
Yeah, the mechanics. Like why? There is no.
But it did come across. I mean, I hadn't seen the first one, but I realized fairly on you had to kill someone to come back human.
Right.
And
That's good.
then I wondered. Then I did wonder if when your boyfriend
Yeah.
killed that one guy and threw it in the slime, was that going to make you human again?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
an interesting point.
In the script, originally I was going to have Debbie's hands come up and pull the guy under, but then I realized, oh, but then she would.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I got rid of that image
Yeah.
just because of that fact. To give you an example of how an actor or an actress can add to a scene, now, like I said, those scenes of her in the tub were my favorites just because they were, I think, the craziest things I've ever written. And the dialogue was definitely there, and everything that you see there is there. However, those long moans and she does. And just the feeling of pleasure that comes through. I didn't write